Okay, welcome. We'll give it another minute or two for a few more folks to roll in, and then we'll go ahead and get this party started. I know we are a day before the holiday here in the US, so um, appreciate everyone for joining us today. Okay. All right, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off with a little welcome. Welcome everyone to the Distilled Spirits Council Ask the Expert webinar series. I am Ross Mulcairn, Director of Member Services and Business Development at the Distilled Spirits Council of the US, as everyone knows as DISCUS. We are recording this webinar, so it'll be available later on the DISCUS YouTube channel and in our member portal. For those of you who are not as familiar, DISCUS is the leading voice and advocate for our members and the distilled spirits industry overall. DISCUS provides a wealth of resources and services, including this webinar series that aims to educate and share relevant trends, ideas, resources, discussions, and opportunities for our members and for the distilled spirits industry. I want to welcome our speakers for today's webinar, Aging Barrels, Managing Your Biggest Asset in a Challenging Barrel Market, Stuart Maxwell, the COO of Proof 8, and Donald Snyder, Distillery Consultant from Time and Tasks. Welcome, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you so much.
So for those of you Welcome. So for those of you who this is your first Ask the Expert, I'm going to ask our speakers a few questions. We're going to be talking through for about 30 to 40 minutes, and then we're going to save some time at the end for question and answer for those of you who have anything that you'd like to get answered. Now, Donald, why don't you go ahead and kick us off and tell everyone a little bit about yourself, what we're doing
Yeah,
here.
thank you so much. Appreciate the opportunity. I like to say I've been drinking for a living and keeping distillers out of trouble for over 20 years now. I started as the barrel warehouse manager at the Buffalo Trace Distillery in Frankfort, Kentucky. I later moved over to MGP when they bought the Seagram's Distillery. After I left the corporate world, I helped craft distilleries all across the country with startup and barrel sourcing and everything in between. And I started a distillery software called Whiskey Systems, which I sold, and now I just kind of help uh, distillers of all size find success, and whether it be an exit or a buyout or M&A, or just try to find a path to profitability.
Thanks, Donald. So I'm Stuart Maxwell, CEO of Proof 8. I've been in the industry ever since I left college. I did a degree in chemistry, and then I started at William Grant & Sons in Scotland, working at the Girvan Distillery, which is the largest distillery by volume in the UK. In that role, I was there for 12 years. I spent various times across our operations teams, technical development teams. I also spent some time in our health and safety teams as well. So our kind of breadth of operations, joining Proof 8 in January 2025. My responsibilities are quite wide and varied, as most small business employees are, but primarily focused on onboarding, demoing, and building our product roadmap. Proof 8 is an inventory management software platform designed for the spirits industry. We started in the UK and have been expanding rapidly into the US since the middle of last year. So, yeah, appreciate this opportunity as well, and look forward to the webinar.
Awesome. Well, thank you both for being here. And Donald, if you don't mind, I'm hoping you can give us a little overview of sort of what the aged barrel market looks like right now, what the inventory is like, and what people need to know.
Yeah, absolutely. There is a lot of available inventory. Now it's definitely a buyer's market. Let's go to the next slide. We'll kind of give you a rough idea about what is out there right now. So, Pernod Ricard, one of the largest liquor companies in the world, they are actively selling their barrels at a pretty aggressive price. Their last availability sheet had 79,400 barrels, and that's everything from bourbon and rye whiskey, some Indiana, some Kentucky, various ages all across the board. And so they're selling a large chunk of their inventory. There's also you've probably seen a lot of bankruptcies happening. Myself and my business partner John Little were the exclusive representatives to try to sell Kentucky Owl barrels. We've got about 35,000 barrels that we've been selling anything from various ages, rye and bourbon, all Kentucky. And then of course you've got online exchanges. The two major ones are Hogs Head and Barrel Hub, and between them there's over 300,000 barrels of aging inventory available. That's everything from new fills to 20-plus-year-old whiskey across all over the United States, from California to Kentucky and everywhere in between. Um, and that's various ages. And of course, you've got distillers you can buy directly from surplus inventory. You can buy directly from MGP, and several distillers are contract distillers like Whiskey House. They've got inventory to sell. And of course, you've got your brokers, which have been around for a long time. Independent Spirit Sourcing, Ultra Pure, JB Toll, Milk Source. They've got plenty of inventory that either they've bought and they're trying to sell their own inventory, or they're representing the sale of others. Easily over 500,000 barrels are available for sale across all the ages, all the mash bills, all the distillers. There is many, many barrels available today for purchase.
Awesome. And then
So
yeah,
go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was
I was
going
going
to
to
say,
ask about the 4-year market. I thought you
Yeah.
had a specific look in that.
yeah. So I've been tracking barrels for, barrel selling forever. So I've amassed just an encyclopedia of barrel pricing, barrel availability, and so this is kind of a peek into some of the data that I track. So this right here is a snapshot of barrels that were between 4 and just under 5 years old, and so effectively a 4-year-old bourbon, in this case from Indiana. December of last year, there was about 7,500 barrels for sale. You could buy a 4-year-old Indiana bourbon whiskey for anywhere a minimum price of probably around $700 to all the way up to almost 3,300 per barrel. In March of this year, obviously those barrels in December are a little older, but between 4 and 5-year-old barrels, there's again about 6,000, 7,000 barrels. And then in last month, the availability of Indiana 4-year-old bourbon whiskey jumped to almost 20,000 barrels available at a price anywhere from just over $600 or $500 per barrel, with an average price kind of dropping down. That's that gray bar of about $600 to $700 per barrel on average for everything up there. So a huge amount of inventory is now available, and the prices are declining. That's just over the last 6 months. Let's go to the next slide. So this is kind of telling a similar price story, but opposite in supply. So here's Kentucky bourbon, again, 4 years old, in that 4-year-old age range. In December, when I pulled the data, you could get one barrel for around $1,000 a barrel, and there was about 45,000 barrels available on the market. And the average price was just under $2,000 a barrel. Flash forward to last month, the supply for 4-year-old Kentucky has dropped. That's available, so it's about 27,000 barrels right now, but you can get it for between $600 and $700 per barrel on the minimum, and the average price is just over $1,000, about $1,200 per barrel for 4-year-old. So jump to the next slide. If we dig into that even more and kind of parse the data even kind of dig deeper, if you look at Bardstown bourbon, 4 years old, bourbon whiskey, not their rye mash bill, from Kentucky. In December, it was just under 12,000 barrels available. Now it's under 8,000 barrels available. The average price has certainly dropped, and the minimum price is now right around right $800 per barrel for 4-year-old. Of course, feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions about the data, or if you'd like to kind of dive in more with me on the pricing and availability. All right, let's jump to the next slide. So where is the lemonade to these lemons? Where is the opportunity? So there's a ton of inventory out there. Obviously, it's a buyer's market. If you are an NDP or a non-distiller produced brand, meaning that you don't necessarily distill it yourself, or maybe you have a sourced brand that you bring in-house, now is the time to fill up that barrel model, right? No one really knows if we're going to, kind of hit bottom yet. Although the cost for some of these barrels are lower than the original acquisition cost. So I don't know if the bottom can get much lower than that. But now is the time. If you have a business model where your profit margin, you meet your profit margin at these barrel pricing, and you want to fill up your barrel model for anything from 1 year old up to 4 or 5, 6 years old, make sure you have that pipeline full. Now is the time to pick up some of those assets to make sure that you have inventory available into the future. Certainly, there's still a lot of non-traditional asset investors. People stepping outside of the traditional stock market, investing in barrels. And there's a lot of investment groups that are still investing in barrels. Certainly now, because there's no reason to believe that the liquor market isn't going to improve. And so, buying these assets to sell the barrels in the future, now is a good time to make that investment. The ready to drink category is growing. It's one of the few categories that are making gains in the market. And so if you've got an RTD product, whether it's a bottle or canned RTD that uses a bourbon, and you could maybe lower your cost of goods, now is the time to kind of update your materials, or maybe even have a higher quality whiskey that's lower cost into your RTD. And then finally, if you have your in-house inventory that you've got a brand that's growing and you just need a little bit of a blending component to stretch it out, make orders, or kind of grow the brand and maybe even a lower price point, now's the time to buy some of those blending components to stretch your inventory out and make it last a little longer. So, so that's kind of what I see as the opportunities in this market. There's many more. But now kind of shift gears a little bit, I'm kind of the compliance guy, the guy that keeps everyone out of trouble for TTB compliance. So this is,
And we thank
if
you
you've
for that,
got
Thomas.
barrels, do what?
And we thank you for your work in keeping
Okay.
everyone in compliance. It's a very
I want to
important
make
part
sure
of the
everyone's
industry.
doing everything above board. So if you do have barrels and you are managing those barrels either in-house or off-site, these are some notes you got to make sure you're keeping on top of. So if you have barrels and maybe you've sold barrels to a different person or maybe a customer or something, but they're in your DSP, remember, you are still accountable for those barrels, for those proof gallons. If the barrel is in your distilled spirit plant, in your DSP, you have to track that as if it was your own. So here's some of the TTB requirements everyone watching this call should be aware of if you own barrels and storing barrels. Obviously, you've got to report those barrels on the monthly storage report. That's the one of the 3 operations reports that everyone's required to fill out each month. Production, storage, and processing are the 3 operations reports. So make sure you're tracking that, tracking your barrels, making sure your monthly storage report is accurate, both in what you're adding to it and taking out of. Make sure that all of those reports are correct and accurate. Most people don't know this, that you actually have to take a quarterly inventory of your barrels and tanks. So if you don't pause at the end of each quarter and confirm and do that inventory and make sure the barrels are there, make sure your tanks are good, definitely make yourself an exercise to go and with a perjury statement, if you can, saying, yep, I'm affirming that barrel inventory is correct and accurate, and make any inventory adjustments that you need to. If you do it every quarter and you happen to get audited, they're going to look for those quarterly inventory records, and the last thing you want to do is go a couple of years where you don't have inventory correct, and any giant losses could be taxable if you find out that your inventory is overstated. So you don't want to do that. When you're filling barrels and dumping and draining barrels or disgorging barrels, make sure you're keeping those logs. So the way the TTB works is they require you to have daily logs, and that's a detailed log of everything that happens in your distillery each day. And then those logs kind of roll up and fill up the TTB operations reports. So if you're filling a barrel, you got to know what the tank it was, what spirit type it was the barrel a new fill, was it a used fill? You got to track all of those things. On the TTB report, it's really just one box, but in behind the scenes, you've got to keep all of those logs in place, legible, discoverable, whether it's in a system or not. You got to make sure you're tracking all those fills. And the opposite goes for draining barrels or dumping barrels. What was the barrel numbers? How old was it when you drained them? Was it new? Was it used barrel? What spirit type was it? How many proof gallons did you recover? What was the loss? Which is what was the original proof gallons? What was recovered, and what was that evaporation loss? All of those things need to be on those logs and tracked, and make sure that you have those at your disposal. If you're blending different barrels, if you're blending a recipe or making an RTD or doing a bottling log, those are different logs. Again, you've got to keep track of those things. Not only do you want to track the cost of goods in whatever system you're using, but make sure that you've got, if you're doing a recipe, make sure you've got your TTB approved formula number on the log. Make sure you've got notes on there. Make sure that you know what spirits you used. Make sure that you're in, that you've got a system where you can track what went into each of the blends so that you can make sure that you are within those tolerances of those approved formulas. Same with bottling logs. What was the tank number that you pulled it from? How many cases did you do? What did you lose, right? And of course, the last thing that I want to kind of warn people about is the excise tax return, right? Make sure when you bottle those barrels and you put those into bottles and you're removing them tax determined, you have a log of how you're calculating the excise tax. For everyone on this call, everyone watching this call, the first 100,000 proof gallons is taxed at $270 per proof gallon versus the traditional 1334 or 1350. So tracking the proof gallons and tracking all of your tax rates is very important. Make sure you have a system that can do that. So yeah, there you go. That's all the things you got to be concerned of. Now, let's say you own barrels and they are being stored at another distillery, right? You may not have to do the TTB reports, but these are some of the things that you want to expect of your contract warehousers. If you do own barrels there, make sure that they're sending you regular inventories and make sure you're looking at them. If there's any discrepancies from one month to the next, make sure you're looking into them. You don't want to go a long time. Just make sure that you can see where your inventory is it there? Is it still accounted for? And just kind of expect your warehousers to send you regular inventory. And also make sure that they have a system that their barrel hasn't been sold multiple times, right? I'm sure no one on this call is going to do anything malicious, or any of the Discus members, or all of Discus members I know are doing things above board. But if you're investing in a barrel and you don't have any sort of proof that they haven't sold it multiple times, just try to make sure that if you're investing in a barrel, that it is the barrel and you own that barrel and it's not being sold to multiple people. But and then also, if you're using a contract bottler who's draining your barrels, maybe they've got your case goods, maybe they've got all of your dry goods, make sure that they are they're tracking it, and make sure that they are telling you how much glass is left, how much cork is left, how much how much inventory is there, and make sure they have a system that updates correctly, and that they can send you your materials, because those are very expensive, and again, you want to hold them accountable. If you next slide. There we go, on site. Now, if you're tracking barrels on site, make sure that you have a system that's tracking cost of goods, right? Know what direct materials went into the whiskey, know what the cost of the new one was. Make sure that you understand, one, for your balance sheet, make sure you're properly insured, make sure that everything is accurate in terms of the cost for the barrels. But also, more importantly, when you drain those barrels, you know how profitable your case goods are, right? And obviously everyone here wants to make a profit, and you only can know what your profit is if you're tracking cost of goods in an effective system. If you're storing barrels for others, so let's say you're a contract distiller or contract warehouser, and you're doing for others, there's the other side of that coin. Make sure that you are able to send regular inventories and that you are confident in your inventory, what's called a system of record, right? That's what the TTB calls your inventory tracking system. And if you do allow barrels to change owners, go back and forth, just make sure you have a process to do that. Track the owner, make sure you're not accidentally selling it multiple times, but you have the ability to track who owns the barrel, when it was tracked, and things like that. A lot of distilleries will kind of pre-sell barrels to a customer. Hey, I want to buy this barrel, and then when that barrel comes of age, we'll drain it and we'll bottle it for you and all that kind of stuff. That's a great way for distillers to maybe get some cash flow, kind of leverage those barrel assets. But if you do lock down that barrel, make sure that you have a system that enables you to manage that barrel, so you don't accidentally dump it or sell it to another person.
Yeah, and Donald, I'd imagine on the cash flow side, as you're talking about that, I know the industry is always people are looking for an infusion of cash right now or something up front. But if you're tracking all of your barrels and you're saying, I'm going to sell each of these when the time comes for XYZ number of dollars, if one of those has been pre-sold, you got to make sure that you have that. So you're not thinking down the road, this is one of 200 and I'm going to make 200X on this. That one you have to be taking out of that process because you've already done it in advance. And no one wants to, reach a point where they're emptying out all their barrels and then the numbers don't add up on the cash that they're expecting to come.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. So having a system where you can flag a barrel with a specific owner, so it lets you know, hey, I've already liquidated that cash, right? I'm not going to get any more cash from that barrel, but make sure you have a system that can manage all of that. And then if you've got barrels that are still owned by you and they're still in your balance sheet and everything's great, then you know that can yield some pretty awesome cash flow in the future. But yeah, good point.
Absolutely.
All right, let's go to the next slide. And yeah, all right. So all the things that you need to do, I lean over to Stuart to kind of go into how one does it.
Yeah, thanks, Donald. Appreciate that. Just next slide for me, please, Evan. Done a great job there setting the scene, because we've described the market pretty succinctly there, where there's more barrels being offered for trade than ever before. There's more non-distiller producers entering the market, more contract warehouses, contract bottlers, private investors getting involved in the industry. And at the same time, compliance expectations haven't become any easier. Just as an aside, we deal with distillers across the UK, Ireland, Australia, South Africa. The US compliance reporting is significantly more complicated than any of these other nations. So I feel for every distiller out there who has to deal with that on a monthly basis. It does feel like the compliance burden doesn't seem to be getting any easier anytime soon either. But in any case, the modern reality is a single barrel might be produced by one company, stored by another, sold through a broker, then bottled somewhere else, and ultimately, could pass through 3 or 4 hands before it's even ended up in a bottle. And each one of those steps creates paperwork and administration. When I was at Grants, one thing was pretty clear. The hard part of producing hundreds of millions of litres of spirit wasn't the collection of data. Our distilleries actually were very good at collecting data. The challenge was making sure that everybody was looking at the same version of the truth. Because we didn't have one system that coordinated between production and finance and all the other things. Every department had part of a story. So operations knew how much had been produced and where the barrel was. Finance knew the value and who'd paid for the barrel, for example. Compliance team, they knew the regulatory status, and sales knew maybe who owned it. But nobody could see that entire journey in one place. So I'll talk to you a little bit about digital deeds, which is a kind of part of our platform at Proof 8, and how that solves that problem by creating a single trusted record that follows the barrel through its entire life cycle. Next slide, please. So this is where a spirits-focused ERP system becomes much more than just a generic stock management software. At Proof 8, every cask has a digital identity from the day even an empty barrel arrives on site. We track empty barrels as well as filled barrels. And alongside that sits a digital deed. which provides a trusted record of ownership that evolves as Barrow kind of moves through its life cycle. So operationally, that means that like production, warehousing, bottling, finance are all working from the same data set, effectively the same system. Additionally, any samples, any location transfers, or any other tasks that have been completed against the Barrow are tracked. So it means you're not re-entering information across multiple systems or multiple spreadsheets, trying to reconcile, this information before month end. When you do have a change in ownership, the digital deed becomes a kind of clear chain of custody. So when the barrel moves warehouse, the location history is preserved. When it's bottled, the complete provenance is already available. And this concept of digital deeds, we've already received industry recognition through Discus actually this year. Earlier this year, we were selected as a finalist in the Innovation Showcase, recognising the potential to improve transparency, provenance, and trust across the US spirits industry. And for us, that kind of validation reinforces what we're hearing from the distillers we speak to every day, that trusted digital ownership records are becoming a core part of modern spirit operations and not just a nice to have. Indeed, even this week, the Spirit Act passed through the House of Representatives, which the benefits of it are obviously quite significant, certainly at the craft level, but it also enhances the need for traceability. I'm sure most of them on the call will know the Spirit Act and have seen the news, but if not, then distillers are entitled to a $2.35 tax credit per proof gallon, up to 100,000 proof gallons, if at least 90% of the agricultural inputs are sourced domestically. So I strongly suspect that the TTB will expect you to have proven the provenance of your raw materials, and you'll need a system to track this. So it's a big benefit, but ultimately, as I mentioned earlier, the compliance burdens are not getting any easier. So if you want the benefit, you have to increase the administration and complexity behind it. So that's what systems are there to do. Additionally, when you're preparing your TTB reports, supporting inventory reconciliation or responding to audits, you don't have to worry too much, because the system, if you've got a system like ours, then the supporting evidence already exists and has been captured as part of normal operations. One thing that we've learned at Proof 8 through various implementations is that our successful projects don't start with just picking us as a software. It starts with us fully understanding the customer's operational processes. As I mentioned at the top of the call, I used to work at distilleries, and a lot of our staff are ex-distillers themselves. And the reason for that is every distiller we speak to is unique. Yes, most distillers have the same sort of underlying processes, but each has its own unique details. And we spend time fully understanding each distillery and the data that underpins the operation. And we help get your data cleaned up, ready for import, which helps the business grow into the platform and just grow in general. Next slide, please. So I'm not going to speak for much longer, just leave you with this final slide. So Donald already spoke about the current barrel market, and there's no doubt we're operating in a very different environment than we were 2 or 3 years ago after the pandemic. Generally across the board, growth is slowed and inventories are pretty high, and therefore capital decisions are being scrutinised much more carefully. And that's a huge challenge for all distillers in the industry, but it does present a bit of an opportunity at the same time, because when you're running flat out, nobody has the time to look at systems or doing wholesale changes, because ultimately these systems are fully embedded in your operational processes. And if you're too busy keeping production moving and serving customers, you don't have time to look at this. But when we have periods like this, it does give us a chance to step back, to clean up historical data, remove duplicate records, remove redundant dry goods, raw materials, finished goods, and standardise our processes. And it gives us a chance to think about whether our existing software still supports your business and where it wants to be in, say, 2, 3, 4, 5 years' time. And every implementation we've done has reinforced one general lesson, which is that clean data is the foundation of good decision making. There isn't a spreadsheet too complicated that we've come across, or a process too convoluted to understand, and for us to understand. And now is the time, because eventually the market will strengthen again. And the businesses that benefit the most won't necessarily be the ones that waited. They'll be the ones that use this period to modernize operations, improve data quality, and build systems at scale with future growth, because the demand will return. And you don't want to be fixing yesterday's data. You want to be focused on the opportunities that the growing market presents. So thanks very much, and we'll move into Q&A.
So,
Yeah.
Stuart, I actually have a question for you as we talk about this stuff. You talk about how sort of, right now we're not in as flat out growth period as we were a few years ago. When we're thinking, when a lot of our distillers are thinking about like, how can I sort of stay strong and nimble right now as we sort of get through this, it does seem like we're doing a lot of belt tightening. We're doing a lot of, batten down the hatches, get what we can get. What is the sort of, requirement or upfront necessity of turning over some of these records, getting to your clean data? Because obviously you want to be well situated for the future when the growth comes, when we're growing stronger again soon. But I could imagine someone saying, I don't have the time to figure out how to get all this done. What does that look like for a distiller who wants to sort of get into the digitizing process from their handcrafted bottles that they've been putting out for so long?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on everyone's circumstances are different, right? Some people, they've had to go through a difficult redundancy process, so they may be a bit more busy than normal, and therefore I appreciate they maybe don't have time for this kind of reflection piece. But ultimately, when you have reduced or slowing operations, it should give you a lot of people a chance to reflect on, why do we do things this way? Why do we collect data this way? And what does this data mean? Does this make sense? We've come across quite a few different distilleries that, when you dig into the query of it, why do you do it this way? And you're like, oh, I don't actually know. It's just the way it's always been done. That answer is pretty common. This is just the way it's always been done. But having the chance, when you change system, it gives you a chance to reflect on your existing workflows, existing processes, and really sense check it and make sure that it makes sense. A lot of our customers have taken this opportunity to really reset almost and go through each one of their each one of the assets, each one of the items, their configurations, make sure it's clean and up to date. And it really gives them a chance to reset. And that reset can kind of springboard you forward. It's almost like a spring clean. Yourself, when you do a big clean out in your house, you feel like refreshed. It's the same thing in your work. If you have this big clean out, it's a feeling of refreshment, a feeling of something new, something achieved, and you feel like you're moving forward. So it's an opportunity to really reflect on where are you at, what do you have, and clean it out and spring forward as a result.
Awesome. And sorry for changing that up on you in the middle of you talking, but I figured, as we have everyone in here asking some questions, I wanted them to see our experts' faces and not just our slides, although they were great and very informative for me. So I hope you guys don't mind. But
did we get any questions from the audience?
I was just going to say, go ahead. I wanted to ask people to come in. If you have any questions, feel free to send them in the chat or the Q&A boxes. Stuart and Donald are very knowledgeable on barrel management and the aging barrel market, and we would love to make sure that everyone here has as much information as they can. If you guys have any questions that sort of come to mind later, or if anyone is watching this recording after this webinar, please shoot us a message, membership@distilledspirits.org. We'd be happy to connect you with Donald or the team at Proof 8, try to get any of this information back to you that we can. Discus is very proud of our role in the industry to make sure that our members are as informed and efficient and excellent as possible. And we're thrilled to have Proof 8 and the folks here as resources for everyone and our experts today. So please, guys, go ahead and send in those questions if you have any, or shoot them to us afterwards. And I will say, I did have another question that I wanted to ask, but before I do that, Stuart, did want to thank you for mentioning Proof 8's role as one of our finalists and 3 winners of the Discus Innovation Showcase at our last conference. We're very proud of the Innovation Showcase that we run every year. The openings for next year should be opening up soon. So if any of you are working with a distillery or someone in the distilled spirits industry who is doing something unique and new in the industry, we encourage everyone to submit. And then you guys can get all the fun little treats and goodies like our friends at Proof 8 got this past year. And we were thrilled to give them an award on the stage at our show in Louisville. Now, Stuart, I have a question in the chat for you. When we're talking about barrel management, Chris is asking about sort of the US market versus other markets. What the differences in barrel management that you've found now that you've entered the US market more heavily, and what adjustments have been made to, understand the US barrel management and tracking and compliance market as opposed to previous markets where, I would imagine most people on the call can tell you were not born and raised in the US.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of differences between UK, Ireland, and say the US market. A couple of little kind of interesting quirks. There's no concept of liquid accounts in the UK or Ireland or any other country. Having things in production, processing, and storage doesn't exist outside of the US. That took a bit of getting used to on my part. Additionally, just some of the terminology using imperial units again takes a little bit of time for my metric head to get wrapped around. But I mean, we've been very lucky in that we've had some great help. We've I don't think Donald mind mentioning we've had some help from Donald as we kind of grew into the market. We have some great design partners as well who helped us understand the market. There are a lot of overlaps between the US and the UK. The biggest hurdle we've had to overcome is getting the TTP reports ready and the system right on the system. As I mentioned in the presentation, the compliance burden in the US is heavy. And making sure each one of those boxes across the 4 reports is correct has been a challenge. But as I say, we've had great partners, great people to lean on. I'm delighted to see we've got there and we've grown this US market quite steadily. So a few differences, most of them little quirks, but it's been a fun ride.
I'll just jump in there a little bit. It's super fun managing and going through all the transaction and making sure that every single transaction hits the right TTB box, the right number of decimals. It's a lot of work, but I found Proof 8 is making huge strides in making sure that everyone is TTB compliant, reports are accurate, and making sure that everything's on the up and up.
And you found that having digital records is easier than just books and books of paper that says what's in what barrel and hope that you can read your own handwriting from 4 years ago?
Yeah. Well, it was funny. When I owned Whiskey Systems, which is a distillery software that fortunately is being sunset at the end of this year, so kind of frees me up to help people like Proof 8. Making sure that all the TTB reports were correct and everything was in the right spot and everything was very meticulous. And I used to joke that my largest competitor was a well-funded tech startup out of Seattle called Microsoft Excel, right? But the reality is there's no way that you can track cost of goods, production, storage, processing, TTB reports, dump logs, all the logs that are required in Excel, and heaven forbid it gets corrupted, right? Or someone accidentally deletes an equation, right? So, I found that that was my number one competitor, but I think even over the last 10 plus years, people have learned that you just can't do this in Excel. You've got to have a more sophisticated system, both for your own peace of mind and also to make sure that you don't have any risk of compliance fines and issues.
I would agree with that. I mean, what's interesting is as we've entered this market, almost every single one of our new customers has come from an existing system. Most of them actually are Whiskey Systems users, and I totally understand why. Even this, we have a couple of customers who are simple kind of one-woman distilleries, and they need a system because, as I say, Excel just doesn't cut it. It's just not enough to track the complexity of the reporting requirements that the US demands of its distillers. So, that's also an interesting talk about the differences between the US and the rest of the world markets. Most of our customers outside of that are coming from spreadsheets because they've been able to track sufficiently through spreadsheets. Eventually, spreadsheets break down after 500, 600, 700 barrels. It just gets too complicated, even outside the US. But in the US, it doesn't matter how small you are, you almost always need a system regardless.
And that system now can track in imperial units. We've confirmed.
Can now track in imperial units? Yes, don't. That's absolutely fine.
That's fantastic. Now, one of the things that this is a little bit tied from the barrel tracking thing, but we've talked a lot about this, and I know, Stuart, you and I actually talked about this last year. When we're thinking about sort of the provenance and the ownership, as you're able to say, you track that empty barrel all the way through until it fills a bottle and goes out to a customer. Is there any sort of, for lack of a better word, sort of soft power, soft influence from that you can say, because we have all this information, what are we able to share beyond just our efficiencies and our able TTB reporting? Is there any benefit that you found to the storytelling or the again, the soft element of sort of saying, look at all of this information we have and what we can tell?
Yeah, I mean, we can look at it from kind of two perspectives. There's the one that's the nice fluffy one, which is, if a lot of the younger people in the market are demanding accountability and traceability, so they demand to see, where did you get that from? Like, what's the story? What's the history? Prove that story. Yeah, prove that history, prove that provenance, and that's extremely difficult to do on paper. But if you have a system where if you can on our system you can double click a barrel and it gives you the entire history of that barrel, that's a huge selling point. Then being able to link that to the bottle and trace all the way back, that's a huge selling point. That's a nice fluffy part of the digitalization of operations. The less fluffy part is that it's less of a problem in the US, but in the UK certainly there's a lot of fraud that takes place because ownership tracking is very light and very lightly regulated. And as a result, there are a lot of fraudulent people out there who take barrels, and then they might have ownership of them, but they can duplicate the ownership records and send them out to unwitting people. What our platform does is that we have the concept of digital deeds. So there's only one ownership record, and that ownership record is transferred digitally into someone's digital wallet. So if you sell that barrel, that person that you sold it to gets a login, and they can see their digital portfolio, which has their barrel in their wallet, and it's all done digitally. And it's the warehouse keeper who is the primary owner of the information. So it can't be a nefarious person that just is giving you a bit of paper and telling you that's who owns it. So yeah, as I say, there's two sides. There's improved account transparency to the end user, to the drinker, which is much more in demand these days, and also it protects the investor in the marketplace as well.
Amazing. Awesome. Well, I would encourage, if anyone has any last questions they want to get in for our experts, please send them along. But one last thing that I wanted to get through, we like to do on these webinars, make sure that I think you guys are great, and hopefully everyone who's tuned in now and watching later wants to work with you guys. But if someone just, has 1 hour of their day and they're, as you've mentioned, a small distillery or someone on a cashed out budget, what are some big takeaways? They left this, they tuned in, and they're like, I had a great time with Donald and Stuart. What are they going to go and tell their boss or whoever else? Is there one or two bits that you want to make sure that everyone takes away from this that makes them more efficient and better moving forward?
Yeah, I'll just jump in. Yeah, if anyone wants to know more about the barrel market, what available barrels, getting the best price, maybe even selling their barrels, which can be tough in this market, reach out to me, and I'll help you out, either buying or selling, and try to get you the best deal. And yeah, that would be the kind of the biggest takeaway here is now is the opportunity to get excellent deals.
Okay,
Yeah,
there are deals to be had. Go get them.
Yeah, absolutely there are. I have two things. One, if you do find yourself in a situation where operations are not at peak and you have the headspace, take the chance to review data quality, really dig into the processes, your operational processes, work out why you're capturing bits of information. Is it useful? What benefit are you getting from that? Really dig into the detail of your operational processes. And the second thing is, as I say, most distillers in the US we speak to have a system. If you do have whiskey systems and you're looking for something new because it's been sunset, then please get in touch. Be happy to have a conversation. Understand if we can meet your needs. Because as I say, it's a scary time going through these changes, but I'm happy to say we've onboarded, a significant amount of US customers now. Some, as I say, very small, but some of our customers have hundreds of thousands of barrels in their inventory. So, quite a significant amount. So please do get in touch. Then the details will be, I'm sure, as part of on the webinar or online after this call.
Yeah, we have that, and we'll go ahead and throw that up. I want to thank everyone for tuning in. If you guys, I know we saw this on the last slide. I know you guys will be at ADI in August, so go visit our friends at Proof 8 there. Discus will be there as well. Come by and say hi to me. And there we go. Oh, but I will get your emails up at the very end, the last slide here, to show how you guys can get in touch with Donald and Stuart. And for those of you who are planning, who are engaged in the market and sort of working with distilled spirits and are interested, especially for our craft distillers, if you are a Discus Craft member, we are having a webinar in a few weeks on the 22nd of July with the Liquor Handbook. We are bringing back the special Discus exclusive craft edition of the Liquor Handbook just for Discus Craft members. So please tune in to that on July 22nd at 3 p.m. The registration link is in the chat. We look forward to seeing you all there. I look forward to seeing everyone in Miami at ADI and on future Ask the Experts. We're going to have these generally Thursdays at 1 p.m. We will see you in the future. I want to thank Stuart and I want to thank Donald, and I want to thank everyone for tuning in. We appreciate having you guys around, and I look forward to seeing you guys in the future. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Donald. Thanks, Ross.